Music begin in 3, 2, 1.
Having fun,
that's what we're gonna do.
Mr. Henry,
Mr. Fight,
exploring along with you.
Learning music, having fun,
that's what we're gonna do. Mr. Henry,
Mr. Fight,
love hanging out with you.
The Music Podcast for Kids.
Hello, and welcome to the Music Podcast for Kids. We're your hosts, Mr. Henry
and Mr. Fight, music educators extraordinaire.
The Music Podcast for Kids is a fun and educational podcast where we learn and explore the best subject ever, music! Today's episode, we are learning about...
Mr. Henry and Mr. Fight took a magical ride to the Beethoven house as Elise, from Beethoven's famous piece of music, Fairy Elise, poofed out of nowhere, turning Mr. Henry's piano into a transportation machine so they could learn more about Beethoven. As they continued to learn, Mr. Fight was given the key to Beethoven's viola, and as he began to play it, some peculiar things started to happen, and all of a sudden, a man appeared. Could it be Beethoven? Let's find out.
And now, the music word of the day.
Music word of the day. Music word of the day. Music word of the day. Music word of the day. Yeah!
Before we get to our main subject of the day, Beethoven, let's take a look at the music word of the day, motif.
A motif is a short order of music notes.
That's right. Since we are in the discussion of melody as part of our Building of the Music House this month, a motif could also be recognized as a short melody.
Super cool! And in our continuation of learning about Beethoven, we get to hear some of his most famous motifs.
Awesome! And that's the music word of the day, motif.
And now the main subject of the day.
Well, here is the key.
The key? The key to what?
To open up the case to Beethoven's viola.
Elise, I don't think that's such a good idea.
Oh, come on, Mr. Fight. It must be okay if Elise thinks it's okay. Plus, you can play the viola.
Well, it's been a while since I've played.
Oh, it's just like riding a bike. No worries, Mr. Fight. Just don't drop it, and you'll be good.
Well, okay. You don't get to play Beethoven's own personal viola every day. Let me see that key. A little twist here, and...
Whoa, it's glowing.
Yeah, it is. Wow.
Be careful with the viola.
Yeah, be careful, Mr. Fight.
I'm a little nervous to pick it up.
Oh, just go for it, Mr. Fight. Let's hear some music from Beethoven.
Okay, here I go.
Wow, Mr. Fight, you remembered how to play that pretty well.
Yeah, I know. I feel like I never forgot. I feel like I'm better than I've ever been.
Special powers Beethoven viola has.
Wait, did you say special powers? Whoa, what was that?
Mr. Henry, I can't stop playing the viola. It's like someone else is taking over. What's that rumbling?
I don't know, Mr. Fight. Grab hold of something.
It's getting more forte.
More forte?
Forte means loud.
Oh, right, of course. Now it's fortissimo.
Sheesh. Whew. It's been a while since I've been back here.
Mr. Henry?
Mr. Fight? It's...
Beethoven?
Well, yes, it's me, Ludwig van Beethoven.
Wow, I can't believe it's really him.
I know. So, Mr. Beethoven, how was your trip?
The viola? Ah, yes, my viola. How I miss the viola.
Of course. Here's your viola. Would you mind playing a little something?
I don't mind at all. Let's see how about...
Well, Mr. Beethoven, we all know that piece. It's your Fifth Symphony.
Ah, yes. I wrote that in the early 1800s. You know this piece?
Of course, it's one of the most famous classical pieces ever. Where was that first performed?
Let's see. The Theater an der Wien in Vienna, 1808.
Wow, cool.
Yeah, Beethoven's Fifth Symphony has 4 movements. A movement is kind of like a section. We will learn more about the sections of movements called form in music in a later episode. As time progressed from the 1750s till now, the sections of music became longer and more instruments were added.
Cool. And that motif that Mr. Beethoven played is probably one of the most famous ever. Remember, motif means a short musical phrase. The motif here is a super famous melody, which is perfect for our month of learning all about melody.
Ah, the piano. Found perfectly where I left it. Right on the floor.
Hey, Mr. Fight, is there a reason why this piano doesn't have any legs on it? The piano is just completely set on the floor.
Well, Beethoven started to become deaf, meaning it was harder to hear, in the late 1700s. By 1816, he was completely deaf. Remember when we learned about pitch, we found out that there are sound waves for each note? Well, since Beethoven could no longer hear the sound waves released through the air, he would try and feel the sound. So, by taking the legs off the piano, the strings found inside the piano would vibrate against the floor, so Beethoven could feel the notes as he was playing.
Wow, that must have been tough to be such a brilliant composer, but unable to hear the music you had written?
Well, yes, but Beethoven could hear the music in his head.
Let's see, do you know this piece?
Oh yeah, I know this piece. I learned this in my piano lessons as a kid. The Minuet in G.
Yep, another famous melody. Great piece.
Yes, well, how about this one?
Oh wow, probably one of my most favorite of all. Piano Sonata 14, Moonlight Sonata.
Yeah, this is a great one too. But wait, what's a piano sonata?
A piano sonata is a type of piece written for solo piano, meaning that it's a piece for just the piano. And typically it has 3 or 4 movements, which we learned earlier are like sections in music.
Ah, gotcha. How many movements does Moonlight Sonata have?
This sonata has 3 movements, and it's a little different than most. Usually the first movement, which Beethoven is playing right now, is not this slow. But hey, Mr. Beethoven was always being creative, and it sure works well.
Yeah, it does.
Ah, no. I need a pen. Does anyone have a pen? I need this changed.
Mr. Beethoven, you want to change something in the Moonlight Sonata?
Yes. A pen to switch one little note here.
Oh boy. Hey, Mr. Fight, what should we do here?
Well, you know, Beethoven was known for coming up with many versions of his works. He was constantly scratching things out and making different sections to come up with a final piece. Maybe we should just try to distract him.
Yeah, good call. Oh, Mr. Beethoven, yeah, a pen. Let's see. Could you play us your famous melody from the Ninth Symphony, Ode to Joy?
Well, yes, my last symphony, number 9. Yes, let's take a listen.
Wow, what a great melody.
Definitely. Completed in 1824. And this part of the Ninth Symphony is the 4th and final movement.
So, there are more sections to the Ninth Symphony?
Oh yes, this 4th section is his most famous of the Ninth Symphony. The entire Ninth Symphony is about 70 minutes long.
Wow, Mr. Beethoven is pretty great.
Mr. Henry and Mr. Fight, I think it may be time to get back.
Elise?
Hello, Ludwig. It's been a long time.
Yes, yeah, a long time. And do you remember?
Remember what?
This piece I wrote for Elise.
But of course.
Whoa, Mr. Fight. That's the piece I was playing that transformed us to this place.
Yeah, you're right. I think I have a way for us to get back. Hey, Mr. Beethoven, do you mind playing for Elise?
I would love to play the piece, especially since Elise is here. Here we go.
Mr. Fight, I think it's working.
I think so too.
Whoa, did we make it back?
Yeah, I think so. It looks like my hair is all intact.
Yeah, same here. That was pretty cool learning all about Beethoven and even some of his most famous melodies.
Totally. Knowing a little about a composer makes listening to music extra special.
And that's all about
Beethoven!
Just chatting, just chatting, just chatting, just chatting, just chatting, just chatting, just chatting.
All right, so Mr. Fight, we did learn all about Beethoven, pretty cool, and but wanted to talk more about Elise. So the piece for Elise, we don't really know if that was for a person named Elise,
Right.
and so there's a couple stories out there as to whether or not it's actually this person's name Elise. So what have you read?
Well, you mentioned something, or we talked about before, about the publisher. What were you saying about the publisher wrote the name wrong at the top?
Yeah.
Possibly.
So one thing that I and we mentioned this earlier in the at the beginning of the episode, how this piece for Elise didn't really even become popular till after he had passed. So it's not like he saw this famous piece of music, turn him into a even more famous composer. But the like while he was living. So the thought was that the publisher, when they took that music from him, that they made a mistake, and that it was actually supposed to be, the name was Therese.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
but he thought it was Elise, and so
yeah, that was one thing I read some years ago, that he wanted to marry this girl named Therese, and Therese was, financially she had a lot more money, and it worked out that if she married him, she would have lost her fortune, her family fortune that she was promised.
Okay.
So the thought was that he was going to propose to her at this party, proposed marriage to her, and he had the song all ready to to present to her and play, but he got so nervous and he just couldn't bring himself to do it, that he froze, and he never asked her. He just left the party, and that was that. But then recently, I was reading that he had a good friend named Elizabeth, and it was spelled Elisabeth. So Elizabeth, it was
sure,
what it
right.
looks
That's
like.
pretty close to Elise, right?
And evidently she was a great friend, so he gave her a lock of his hair. So it sounds kind of weird, but back then, if someone gave you a lock of their hair, you were considered a really good friend. So this Elizabeth got this lock of hair right before he died, and I was just thinking in my own head, I'm thinking, well, Elizabeth, we could shorten it and just, some ladies are called Liz or Beth.
Sure.
Or, maybe she was just called Elise. But
yeah, maybe that's what he called her, Elise.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So we don't really know who this Elise person is.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's just an interesting conversation. And the one thing we talked about as well was that he would always scratch things out a lot.
Yeah.
So a composer like Mozart, for example, one of the things that was really amazing about Mozart was that they were like first versions, right?
Oh,
so
wow.
his music was just coming out of him onto paper, and people would look at it and be like, oh my, these are the first, this is the first time you wrote it?
No edits or anything.
There's no edits.
Yeah.
There's nothing. And that was just kind of like abnormal.
Right.
So it's more normal to have like many versions of the work, and he's scratching things out. And even when he was like, things were being performed and completed, even in like real time, I think he would be scratching things out during performances, things like that. So, I'm wondering that maybe that publisher story could be true as well. It could be a combination of the two where, Beethoven's probably scratching stuff out like crazy, and it may have just been hard to read.
Yeah, sloppy. I tell my kids at school that, make sure you work on your handwriting skills, because you could write something and someone could misinterpret it and it could be something totally different.
That's right. Right, exactly. Yeah. So, so we wanted to at least just talk about that and have a conversation about that, because, our story, of course, is totally made up. But
it's fun to think about that. Like what could it have been,
Right,
it's
exactly.
a lot of fun.
Cool. Sounds great. Well, thank you so much.
You bet.
Time to wrap it up, folks.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Music Podcast for Kids.
We hope you enjoyed the show, and most importantly, learned something cool today about music.
Remember to send in your jokes or even a topic in music you would like us to discuss by visiting our website, themusicpodcastforkids.com. If you are interested in awesome educational and fun songs for your kids to listen to and sing along with, please visit brucefight.com. Music is available to download with iTunes and most streaming platforms like Spotify, Amazon Radio, and YouTube. Links will be found in the show notes.
If you are interested in learning how to play the piano with a fun and engaging online curriculum geared toward kids, get started with the free mini piano course for kids ages 6 to 10. For older kids and even adults, join Mr. Henry with a 7-day free trial of his online piano group. Links will be found in the show notes.
Please leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts, and also share the podcast with friends, relatives, aliens, whoever.
Again, we thank you so much for tuning in.